Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I'm H.A. Conrad, coming to you from Brooklyn, and semi-alive after my second dose of Moderna vaccine. As always, my intrepid co-host is joining me from the West Coast. Hello, Stuart.
Yo, hey.
So today we have actually quite a few little news items. Some of them are like a lot of fun. And our review recap today is the episode Divergent in The Walking Dead, another Daryl episode. And but before we get to that, let's kick it off. Let's kick it off with some overall news. So what's going on the West Coast here? You know, things are they're opening up vaccines to more people. It's open to 50 years of age and older now, and they're looking to open it up more. My experience yesterday when I got my second dose was just honestly just seamless and fast. I think it was about 16 minutes, including the time I had to wait to make sure I wasn't having a reaction. They seem to have it down at least, so that's good news. The bad news is that I think more of the variants they're finding, that's sort of now the predominant strain that they're seeing, which is tough because I don't know what's happening out like on your coast, but here with the nicer weather and everything, people are just like out. And where I had to go and get my dose, I have not been on the subway a lot. This is like probably maybe the fourth time this year I've been on the subway, and there is a marked difference between my neighborhood and the Lower East Side, which is where I got mine. And it's a little, I mean, people are wearing masks, but there's like a lot of people out dining in COVID cubes, as I call them. Like, I don't know why they think that, we've talked about this before, but they're like really kind of closed up, weird little plasticky cubes. And
they're like built into parking spots, or a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then you have like walls between them. Yeah, I was in San Francisco the last couple days because it's spring break. So
nice.
I take my vacations when schools are out these days. And we actually went somewhere. We were like, all right, 12 months in, let's go somewhere. So we got an Airbnb. We were walking around the city doing tourist stuff. And honestly, for being in a big city, like there's no international tourism travel right now, right? It's honestly kind of the best time to do tourist stuff in a city that you wouldn't ordinarily do because it would be like mobbed. So it was actually kind of great.
Oh, that's good.
So there were people out because it was a beautiful sunny week in the city, and so a lot of people were out, but everything we were doing was outside except one thing. We did the immersive Van Gogh,
which is
in a warehouse, and that's timed entry, and you have your circle that you can stay in.
Yeah.
And so and masks are everywhere. I didn't see anyone. Well, no, there are. You're in a city. There's going to be people not wearing masks. The lunatic fringe, etc.
Well, we went we had the same, like, for the most part, people were wearing masks, and that was definitely true. But like when you're looking at where people are eating and stuff, and they're eating in these kind of weird places where I'm like, there's just no way they're not sharing germs in there. There's no way things are not spreading in there. And we did end up, there's one of our favorite restaurants is called Rosie's, and it's like a really incredible like taco Mexican restaurant place, and we've been missing it. That's one of like the places we've really been missing. You can't really do takeout very well from there, obviously, because it's not in our neighborhood. But we were talking to one of the managers, and obviously we were outside. They had, the way they have set it up is very, they've been very, very careful. And the manager was telling us that, it's been tough because you have a lot of people being careful, but then there's some patrons that come in and just are being like kind of belligerent and thwarting it. And, it's up to the people at the restaurant to basically say, hey, you got to go and put this on. He's like, but it's sort of like everybody who comes into work, they need to work, but there's like this sort of inherent risk basically, just because you're really dependent on other people being smart about it. And again, he said this is, it's rare, but he was really, but I have to say I was very happy to see how careful they were being, and they have taken just extraordinary precautions at their place, but that was not what I was seeing at other places, so I don't know. But San Francisco, did you go out to eat? Did you?
Yeah,
okay,
we mostly got delivery, but so that was another thing, was like good restaurants that didn't do delivery before are doing it now. And this is not like a new revelation. This has been going on throughout COVID, but in the city, it meant that we could have dim sum and get Indian food, which I can't always get. And so we definitely took advantage of the cuisine options. And then we did sit out at on some of those COVID cubes now and again when we were out on the town. But it was good. Yeah, it felt safe, and it
Well,
was just good to have a change of scenery.
it honestly depends on how the COVID cubes are set up. Like, I think if they're basically set up so that it's like just you and your party are being kind of,
Well, that was the idea.
yeah, like I think that those are fine. But what I'm seeing is a lot of like kind of, I don't want to call it COVID theater, but that's kind of what it is because there's just no way that just with the ventilation and things that they have set up in these things that this is a good idea. Which just from what we know about how this is.
We definitely saw some of that too. Like we also did a ride on this Ferris wheel thing, which is like only your party would go into the gondola, if you will. And they're taking temperatures before you could go on. And the guy doing the temperatures is like, all right, let me just take your temperature. Beep, 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 goes through the whole family. Doesn't look at any of the readings as far as I can tell. Because I was there holding my breath because my kid has extremely hot face.
Yep.
But it did nothing triggered. So I was just like, oh, okay, we're just gonna pretend, like not look at the okay, whatever, man. I want to get on this Ferris wheel, so cool.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think things are sort of getting back to normal. I guess my only hesitation is that I just think it's not quite ready to go fully back to normal, but clearly people are ready. Like they're just champing at the bit to try to get it going. So we'll see what happens. But again, I was really impressed with the amount of mask wearing and stuff. So I'm definitely not being negative about that aspect. But I certainly will feel better once I get past the whatever number of days it means that I'm at least mostly vaccinated. So
it's a couple of weeks, right? It's 2 weeks,
yeah.
And then you're good to go.
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, even with the Pfizer and Moderna after the first dose, you're probably at about 80%, they say. So the second dose is honestly just to up that, to kind of give your immune system something to grab onto and be like, yep, this is what you're recognizing so that you fight it. So I'm pretty, it's decent at this point. So I'm not feeling quite as stressed, but,
Awesome.
But in any case, let's talk about some news items because there's some really interesting stuff. Dead Again trailer, which is a Brit zombie film, and it's they're definitely going for like a bit of a Shaun of the Dead thing on this. I don't know how it will be. There was another
what was the name of the Hot Fuzz?
Hot Fuzz, yeah.
Yeah.
They're kind of going for that feel. And there was a film called Dead Again that was released in like the 90s with Kenneth Branagh and Emma Thompson. It was like a really small little film, but managed to get Robin Williams was in it and whatever. It's like a film noir thing. It is, and who else is in it? Like Andy Garcia, Derek
I feel
Jacobi.
like I saw that when it came out, but I don't remember anything about the plot.
It's kind of overly dramatic, but it is kind of like fun. I don't know. Like there's some bad things about it too, but I think it was one of those fun little projects that a lot of people, people just were like, we'll get together and do this little thing. But it was kind of fun. So, but this is not that. This is a different Dead Again. They filmed it in 4 days, and I'll definitely give it a go. I don't know how you were feeling, but I'm like, hey, anything that is trying to at least aspire to be like Hot Fuzz or Shaun of the Dead, like I'm gonna give that a try. What do you think?
I think this looks terrible.
Of course it does. It's supposed to look terrible.
Extremely bad. I mean, I'm saying that knowing the kind of bad stuff that we have seen before.
but don't you want to rip it apart? No. I don't know.
No, I don't think that this even rises to the level of review worthy.
I will say anytime something takes 4 days to shoot, that is a bad sign. So I don't know exactly what the intention was, but it takes kind of some chutzpah to be invoking the name of Edgar Wright as something that you're trying to be if you're not coming near that. So I don't know. I think it might be worth seeing at least a bit of this to see how it did. Just saying.
I saw the trailer.
I did too. It's
that meets my what I need to see.
Okay, but if you felt like that about this one, how did you feel about Aquarium of the Dead?
Absolutely the same.
Yes, that one was even
Aquarium
more impressively weird.
It definitely has some Sharknado DNA.
Oh yeah, definitely, without question.
It's got a lot of weird prosthetic and CG fish animals.
They were very excited about Octopus Zombie, right? Like that looked impressive.
octopus zombie, starfish, like adhesive zombies. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the fish are gonna kill you, and well, I guess the seals too. So it's not just fish, but all the creatures in the aquarium become zombies maybe, and then are going after the people. I didn't see any human zombies in the trailer. Did you?
No, only the animal zombies. So we'll have to. I don't know if we can bear both of these, but maybe we will. It depends on how desperate we get for content later on, I suppose. And then more exciting, we talked up for a smidgen about this, but there's the Cold War Dead Cold War Dead comic series that was in Heavy Metal Magazine, and this is something George Romero did. And there's an interview with him, and it looks kind of cool. So I'm interested.
George C.
Romero. It looked, and I remember being excited when we even saw this teased. So it would be, maybe we should check it out. I think I want to. But this looked, and they're just having the interview with him and how he thinks about things and how he always thinks about his universes is kind of interesting. So.
Yeah, I hadn't heard of George C. Romero. I feel like maybe we've talked about this project, but we've definitely talked more about George A. Romero's daughter, right. I think, than the son. So I was kind of interested to see that this guy's got his own thing going on too.
He's got his own thing. It's interesting because it's like, he kind of grew up steeped in this stuff. And, I think it sounds like, at least from what he was saying in the interview, that it feels like something that would be interesting to read in any case, to see how they are envisioning this. And obviously he's got the Romero name, so there's definitely some buy-in with that. But he was talking about this world very intelligently. So I'm certainly, it piqued my interest, so I'm certainly going to give it a go. And plus, it's not like a very long series, at least at this point. So we can kind of see where it goes if you're up for it at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be interesting.
And lastly, this is them fight. I don't know. This is kind of interesting, but Mr. Kirkman of Walking Dead fame had an AMA.
I'm sure the AMA was to promote Invincible, which is probably now available to stream on Amazon Prime.
Yeah,
I haven't watched an episode yet. Have you seen it? I have
not seen it yet, but Mr. Scott Gimple is definitely attached to this, so this may be why this came up. And a fan
Is he attached to Invincible?
I thought so.
I know that they've worked on another comic book project.
I am almost positive that he's attached to it, and if I'm wrong, apologies. But in any case, as we know, Scott Gimple, and we're definitely in this group of people who have made some comments about it, but apparently during this AMA, a fan basically said that they stopped watching the series because Scott Gimple ruined it, and Robert Kirkman basically said, no, that's not true. He just thinks about it a different way. And, one thing I will definitely say, that I think people should take this into account in general. I've certainly liked some things that Scott Gimple has done, and there's been some really amazing.
It's not black and white at all.
No, and there's been some amazing things, but I also think that this is an incredibly complex and difficult series. There's storyline upon storyline in the comics, in the graphic novels, and then you've also got to kind of think far ahead where it's going to take you, the different storylines. And also you're kind of left with where people have left you with storylines too when you become a showrunner. I certainly didn't agree with some of the things, and I do think that he maybe ran into a wall, and there were some choices that he made that I certainly am not a fan of. But I also understand that this is a complex show to try to be a showrunner of, and clearly everybody is so invested in it that it's hard to do right. I will say Angela Kang, in my opinion, is extraordinary, and she really gets it in a way that I think maybe he didn't, or gets it in a different way, or maybe in a way that you and I agree with more. And one thing that I think she does really well that I think unfortunately I think he got backed into corners and then tried to make the decisions you and I dislike so much, which is that characters suddenly do things that you definitely can't see them doing. Like, you've built these characters to a certain point, and then suddenly they're like exactly the opposite, just to try to pivot the storyline into another direction because you were backed into a corner. She doesn't do that, and I think we've definitely seen that, especially in this season, where and even with the restrictions of COVID and whatever, and she's really done this, like, I don't want to say a love letter to these characters, but she understands these characters, and I think the writer she has on staff understands them too. And this most latest episode is case in point, basically, in my opinion.
The thing that Kirkman says in this AMA that I think is most telling is that he says that nobody on Earth cares more about Walking Dead than Scott Gimple, which is insane because he created it. And so he's basically saying Scott Gimple cares more about Walking Dead than Robert Kirkman. Robert Kirkman is maybe over The Walking Dead, I don't know, or he just knows that in Gimple he's got this guy who has really embraced it and taken it on to himself. And I agree with everything you're saying about Angela Kang, but I do think that Gimple's not perfect. He is responsible for some of the moments that I think I like the most from this series, and I always attribute those little diorama scenes to Gimple because they started in season 2 when I think he was just getting going under Glenn Mazzara as the showrunner. And the other thing is, I do think he failed in a significant way, and not just in character inconsistencies, but with the Savior War plotline, where the show almost did stall out and completely fail, and it has taken Angela Kang to come in and really revitalize the show, starting at the end of the Savior War. But like the couple seasons there, basically after everything from that cliffhanger season ender with was it a season ender or mid-season when Glenn and Abraham bit the bullet, everything for 2 seasons after that it was really touch and go. And if you've listened to our podcast, we slogged through those seasons and weren't super pumped about it, honestly.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's all attributed, unfortunately, to Gimple. Like, that was before he became the overlord of the storyline.
Right.
And then I guess in that role, he has continued to. He hasn't necessarily kept up the standards that I would like to see him with Fear the Walking Dead and those 2 new showrunners. If presumably he, as this like overarching command of the storyline, if he supposedly has that. Those 2 were not kept on task nearly well enough.
And again, the same thing was happening with those shows that we disliked about the seasons that he was primarily involved in for The Walking Dead. I do take it back.
A real continuity problem there.
Yeah, he's not attached to Invincible. I was thinking of ex Walking Dead people, and obviously, I think Steven Yeun is, and a couple other people, but not him. He did apparently have some involvement in the spinoff that's coming up and some other stuff. But as you just said, like, I'm not sure how much I trust that because, again, it's some of the storylines we've seen with Fear the Walking Dead have been honestly kind of anemic and boring because it's
and
like
the World Beyond too. That one, he's looking over Matt Negridi's shoulder as that dude's the showrunner for that limited series, and that first season was weak sauce.
Yep, agreed.
In like multiple ways, especially that finale. Oh my gosh, the twins are geniuses.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, I do want to put this out there just in general, like, look, for these people that are out there creating things, and I do like him, and I think he's got some fantastic ideas. But maybe, look, sometimes maybe it's an overarching, I don't know, maybe it's not being the showrunner, maybe it's, I don't know, there is I just think it's a lot more complicated than fans sometimes give it credit for. And I think recognizing how hard that job is, I will say that. And there's definitely been some Scott Gimple things that I think have been amazing. So, I'm gonna give him a little bit of it's not a simple like total hate, though I certainly wish that things had gone in a different direction. But as we know, these productions are so complicated. There's a lot going on with them, and there's also probably a lot of politics that we are not unaware of. So some of these decisions that are made are probably not necessarily obvious to everybody about why. So just saying that. But anyway, that's it.
Brave of Robert Kirkman to go onto Reddit and do an AMA, given the fan base.
Yeah.
I think that it was an absurd thing for anybody to say that Gimple ruined the show. I think.
Yeah, no, and I think, but you know what? Sometimes on those AMAs, that's exactly the kind of question that people ask, and then it gets all these like clickbaity things happening, which is exactly what happened here. And I think people say these things to try to, I don't know, try to like egg people on and see if something will stick. And so there you go. But I am ready to chat about Diverged. Are you?
We should. Yes, let us know.
And then this is directed by David Boyd and written by Heather Belson, I believe. And this is a Carol Daryl episode, sort of. Not together, as we saw before, and it's a bit of a continuation of what we saw in their episode that had featured them earlier. And, you know, they are basically in this, they're walking back, or so we think, and this episode basically deals with a bit of the aftermath of the things that they've said to each other and where they are currently.
I mean, they had a real talk moment on the porch of Leah's old house. So yeah, like there needed to be some sort of aftermath, and it was an abrupt ending to that episode where they just had this really harsh exchange, right? And then it ends with Carol saying, "Oh, I'm gonna fix this door," and that's we don't see the aftershocks, and so that's what basically this whole episode is.
Right. And you know, this is the thing. Neither of these characters are really good about talking about anything. They both tend to run. They both tend to bury themselves in what other task is at hand. Daryl especially is very like, I am going to go hunting instead of talk about emotions or whatever he's got to do. Wander out through the woods like some kind of weird hermit. Carol does similar things. She'll maybe talk to other people a little bit more, but there's definitely this sort of like this passive aggressive thing going on where she's just trying to sort of avoid thinking about something. And I mean, I think it's very, very clear that they both know that something has been damaged here. They're trying to kind of, I don't know, not have a truce per se, but they don't clearly want to talk about it any further. But there is some exchanges between them where it's sort of like, you know, that thing when you're mad at your friend and you just don't want to take any help from them. And, you know, she's like walking along trying to open this canteen and he offers her his knife to help. And she reluctantly takes it. But they're not like talking. All of this is very much about sort of actions between them. And she even, you know, she does say something like, "Oh, you don't have to apologize." And he's like, "I wasn't going to." And like, there's just like this awkward thing between them at this point. And it's pretty clear that he's not going back to Alexandria with her.
Yeah, although as this episode plays out, you're like, why didn't he? Because he does as soon as he can.
Well, honestly,
it's not like he had something specific in mind, clearly, because he goes through a bunch of stuff. And then he does go back to Alexandria without having accomplished anything.
Right, but I think that part of what it was is that he just needed some time alone to maybe process some of the things that just happened between them. This is one of his longest-standing relationships. And in fact, I think you could say it's the longest-standing continuing one since Maggie had left, Rick's supposedly dead, Michonne's off doing her whatever. And
they're definitely their longest, because he was the first one of the like hardcore Survivor cast to reach out to Carol in season 2 when Sophia's missing in the woods. He's the one who is going to her and saying, "I'm going to go out and find your daughter," and he's the one bringing her flowers and doing all this kind of outreach to her, even when he is actually kind of shunning the rest of the group back in season 2, which I know is a million years ago in the show's chronology. But like that was the beginning of this like tight bond that they have, and it's been ever since.
Yeah, I know. And so, of course, he's troubled, she's troubled. And then they both kind of take it's like, so, you know, ridiculously clear, but they both take divergent paths in the woods.
That scene with Dog.
Then Dog insult to injury. Dog goes with her.
Oh, but he's torn. You know, Dog's looking both ways. That poor Dog actor. He does such great work in this episode. He does do good work. And good so boy. But that's the thing is that, and then they're both kind of lost without each other. They're both capable and everything like that, but it's definitely a troubling time for both of them, and they're trying to process some things. Yeah, Carol's going through a lot in her head, but honestly, like just the act of her going back to Alexandria and trying to work on stuff.
Yeah.
Is her trying really hard to prove to Daryl that she isn't just always running away, right? So she's really working on this, or at least as much as she can.
She is, but it's also like this thing where, I mean, we saw this when she went to Oceanside. She doesn't feel like she fits in a lot of places, and she doesn't feel useful. So unless you got Carol sort of like plotting to take out these sort of big bads and things like that, she's just not totally comfortable. I guess she did have maybe a respite when she was with Ezekiel, and obviously
just as royalty.
Yep.
We
And
didn't
she
really get. I don't feel like I got a great sense of her day to day as the queen.
no, but I mean, I think
It was
she
parenting in a way. Like
yeah,
she was
and she
taking
was
care of
parenting
Henry.
Henry, and so she had something there. And so now she's just a little bit lost. And one thing, my only comment about this episode that I wish there had been slightly more of is that there was some interactions between her and Jerry, which I thought were incredible. I love him as a character, and I just would like to see a little bit more of him than they usually show. And I
That
was,
was this, right? I mean, he had like 4 scenes.
mm-hmm,
The first few, it does feel like they're not
yeah.
connecting at all, and he doesn't seem to really understand what she's talking about most of the time. He's
Well,
just kind of there. I felt like he should have had something on deck to give her to do. Nobody in Alexandria should not be working on something right
right,
now.
but I think it's also showing that, she's been away. There isn't really a place that she slots in, and all the things she's suggesting had already been done because, in fact, she had been away.
Hmm.
And I think that he's also working hard and is just like somebody that never finds a lack of anything to do and just kind of does it. I also think he is fully aware that there's something going on with her, but he doesn't know how to talk to her about it. So talking about inane stuff and giving her a look like, "Oh, you are a little over the deep end," is kind of what we're going to get from him. And
Yeah, that weird scarf. I
that
feel
was
like
very strange. It's
why
like,
she picks up this ratty thing off the street and she's like, I'm gonna fix this, and
mm-hmm,
then she ends like the story of the scarf, like the story of the penknife in this episode are both kind of like parallel and
mm-hmm,
weird and loaded with meaning, but
yeah.
I'd never had high hopes for the scarf,
No, the
frankly.
scarf looked like it was pretty far gone, which I think anybody could see.
Unless it was like Leah's or something, because Dog stops and sniffs at it, and I'm
Mm,
like, oh, okay, is this going to be like a bloodhound moment? And it's just like, this is a dirty scarf that I'm
just a
going to
dirty
sniff.
scarf. So she's, and then she tells the story of Stone Soup, which I have heard, and there's
Oh
also
God,
like a ton
I've
of,
read that
yeah,
150 times in the last
mm-hmm,
couple years.
yep. And
Her
so,
version is different from the one I know.
yeah, hers was definitely compressed, I suspect. There's also one with like Stregonona. Is that the one you know of? Anyway, but
No, I don't know.
she goes
Is that
back.
witchcraft?
Well, it's yeah, and never mind. But they do the story of the stone soup in that. But in
The
any case,
version that I know is basically like communism is good.
yeah, kind of, yeah,
I mean, that's kind of, I think, every version or a lot of them. It's like a couple of poor travelers come into town and
yep,
everybody's locked up all their groceries. And it's like, no, but if we all share.
yeah, pretty much. She's in her quarters and Dog is there and there's a rat and we're seeing a little bit more of the after effects and they talk a little bit more about the dearth of food in Alexandria. It's definitely a dire thing. And we see Carol trying to make the best of it. She is trying to make a soup. She has a little bit of stuff, and soup is something that can go a pretty long way. But she's also very unsettled. And so, she really is rattled pretty easily. She's in this, like, basically there's just so many different, like, roadblocks to her making soup or being helpful or useful or how she's feeling. She's feeling just totally powerless, I would say. And so you see her focus changing, like there's this one thing I can control. And in this case, the big sort of catalyst is the rat. I will say the scene between her and Dog where Dog's going crazy trying to get the rat. Anybody who has had a dog and maybe dealt with any kind of an issue like this understands that a dog will not give up or until they like get it. Cats too to some extent, but dogs, especially like of this variety, are not going to give up until they get it because they just they can smell it basically. And I digress by saying that I don't know if I told you this, but we have discovered that there is a rather massive raccoon that's been making visits to our roof. And I admit I was caught a little off guard because it's unclear where it's coming from. But we had noticed like prints up there in the wintertime on the snow. And I'm like, what is making these prints? And it turns out it's a raccoon. We have not seen him recently, but when he's up there, he's making a lot of noise.
Huh.
And
I actually killed a rat just 2 days ago with a shovel. My neighbors are out of town, and I've been feeding their bearded dragon and their fish. And when I was out of town, my other neighbor was helping out. And then on Friday when we come back to town, I go over to their place, and I'm like getting lettuce out to feed to this lizard. And I look at the countertop, and there's poop on the countertop, on the cutting board, on the dining room table,
yuck.
on the floor. There's a sweet potato that has been like, there are shavings all around it. Like this thing has been going to town. And so me and my other neighbor, we make a plan. She puts down, well, she does a lot of this by herself. She puts down traps, and then she calls me Friday night and she's whispering and she's like, "Can you come over here? I think I see it." And so I grab a shovel and I run over, and we look around the corner and it's in there. It's like barking weirdly, like rats barking. What? Turns out it had been winged by one of the rat traps. And the tie-in to the show is, where are the actual rat traps?
Well, right.
There should still be some, one would think.
Right. And also the rat trap.
Long story short, I hit it with a shovel in it a few times. And then I was wondering, I really expected them to eat this rat in this episode. Like
I kind of thought
100% that was going in the soup.
So that's what I thought was happening too. That's not what happened. But this sort of frustrating thing just becomes the sort of MacGuffin, the thing that she's got to like control and can't control. And ultimately when she stops, it gets out of her life. Although we all know that rat is coming back because there's a food source there. But, my thing is that it's the trap that she sets up for it would definitely not hold a rat of this size. And it's a pretty massive rat, or at least that's what it looks like.
Yeah, it's a good size. It's bigger than the one that I got.
And, I felt like she reacted weirdly to it because she knew that there was a rat in there. Maybe she didn't expect it to be so big, but then that's how it gets away.
I don't think she expected it to like slip out of some corner of the box, which is kind of what happens. And then, Jerry freaks out a little bit when he sees it later too.
Yeah,
so I think rats just have that effect on people.
It's terrifying.
Like a massive spider. You're kind of always going to be a little bit like, whoa.
But it's interesting because squirrels are just kind of rat looking with the tails. They look.
Oh, I don't trust squirrels, man.
Yeah,
especially if they don't run away.
They freak me out a little too. So, but in any case, that's sort of the whole thing. But there's like this whole thing where Dog wrecks her room and he's trying to get it. And then, poor Dog is just sort of like, all right, I'm going to hang with Carol. I know she's losing it a little bit. And he's definitely a source of both frustration and comfort to her in this episode.
Yeah.
Even when she's going her craziest, it's
when she goes to bed, she looks so lonely, right? But then there's Dog, and he's gonna do that actually super annoying thing where he like shoves your arm around because he wants you to be on him in a certain way. Yep. So, but I would probably go a little bit crazy trying to sleep with a dog with that much energy. But she looks at peace, sort of, or at least more happy than she did when she first sat down.
Right.
So there's like. You feel for Daryl in those scenes. You're just like, oh, he's out there with nothing.
Yep.
But it turns out he doesn't sleep. He's just fixing his motorcycle in the dark
all night. And he's missing his trusty knife that he gave to Carol, and so he goes in search of another one because he can't fix his bike, I guess, without it. He does have another knife, but it's just big and not quite as easy to use. And it's, you just kind of see how he just sort of manages things. And this has always been what Daryl does, is that he's like, okay, I'm not going to think about the stuff that just happened with Carol. I'm going to go, okay, my bike's broken. I'm going to fix it. And then ultimately, I think he just had such a crap night that he's like, all right, I'm just going to go back to Alexandria. But you're right. He didn't have a specific task that we saw he was doing. And there wasn't, and he does come out of it with a couple of multi-purpose tools, some knives and some MREs, which he
magazines.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it's actually a really good haul. He finds those two soldiers and very smartly takes them out without having to fight a whole bunch of other zombies, because there were quite a few others out there. I kind of enjoyed those. I liked looking at him rifling through their bags and getting the good stuff. Those Leathermen are kind of mint condition though, considering they've been out in the rain for years.
Maybe, but they've been in a thing, so maybe that helps. I don't know. But in any case, he ends up back, and again, there isn't too much talking between him and Carol, and she's come to also an understanding. There is the interaction between her and Jerry admits that he's coming to check on her, and she looks, and I'm sure other people maybe heard the craziness that was happening at her house the night before, where she basically breaks down the wall to try to get to the rat. I'll admit to you, when this was happening, I was afraid a whole wall of rats was going to come out of there.
wall of rats or just a bunch of walkers or who knows what was
something.
back there.
Um,
Like once she has broken down the drywall, you see that it's really just the normal amount of space you would expect between layers of sheetrock and some
right.
insulation. But when you're seeing it from the other side of the wall, when she's first making those cuts, it looks like there's a whole nother room back
Oh
there. So it
yeah,
was a little bit confusing.
it was, and I thought maybe she was going to find a food store. I just thought there was
Like this
something
isn't New
else.
York. There
Yeah,
aren't secret apartments behind walls.
you saw that. That is terrifying. That woman's like video. Did you see it?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
felt like a week of people in Jersey and New York finding secret basements or secret apartments
I
behind their
mean,
bathrooms.
apparently that's what the movie Candyman was kind of like. That's what inspired it. Was that, well, it's kind of like a terrifying thing, but they were those kinds of rooms meant for like handymen and whatever. And there was some guy that was crawling into them and like attacking women for a few years before they figured out what was happening. So that's how they
Jeez.
based Candyman. Candyman, and even more in terrifying film premise. But in any case, I did think that there was something more to that, but it was fine that there wasn't. And Jerry comes by, basically, and he's just flat out like, hey, I could make up a reason, but I'm kind of worried about you because you're acting like a freak. So let's talk. And, this is kind of, I would say this is one of the first times we've seen Carol open up to somebody other than Daryl in a while, but also, Ezekiel's gone, and so she doesn't have him. Maggie's certainly not somebody I think that she's going to really necessarily bare her soul to.
Yeah, but she spent a lot of time with
Right.
Jerry and Ezekiel, so it makes sense. But yeah, I don't really get where Jerry, how other than the nocturnal sounds, which I'm sure were pretty audible in a quiet community with no generators or no sounds. You just suddenly hear somebody attacking a wall.
Right.
I don't really get why he thought she was so damaged. The scarf thing, I think, was the biggest tell. And then the
Well,
next
yeah.
day or whatever, or later that day, he just sees her fixing the solar panels.
Yeah.
Really? I mean, I don't see any other behavior that would suggest that
Well,
she
he
was
saw
like going
her.
off the
He
deep
saw
end.
her coming back from. She
Oh,
goes
right,
off.
covered in blood after she
Yeah, and I
found the
mean,
medals.
he's like, everything okay? She's like, oh yeah, it's peachy.
She honestly seems kind of happy right after she kills
Yeah,
all
but I
those
think maybe
zombies.
that's what worries him is that she's just kind of like wandering around, and he just doesn't know how to ask, and so I think he works up the courage to do that, and they do come to kind of an understanding, and basically she confesses that how she's sort of feeling broken, and so that's different. And then by the time Daryl gets there, she seems not necessarily at peace, but maybe where she's trying to work through some things. And I wouldn't say that they have made up, but Daryl does, leave the knife with her. She tries to give back to him, and so there is that. So that there is always this unspoken thing between them, and so I do think that there is hope. Clearly, that it will be mended, but there's going to take some time. I would say. And then, there is the funny thing where he's asking if Dog was good, and she's like, "Oh yeah, he's great." Maybe because she doesn't want to admit that he was bad.
He wasn't that bad. It was a rat in the
Yeah, I
house. What are you gonna
know.
do? No, I think that's a good boy. And the scene where she is trying to chase the rat around the pantry,
And she turns
and
into the dog,
well,
basically.
they cut back to Dog every so often, and his little haunches are quivering.
Yeah,
He's looking so excited, but he's not barking. And
right.
I don't know if this is a breed thing. Is he a Malinois?
I
One
think
of those,
so. He's a
like a police
very,
dog.
yeah. So,
His little rump is just shaking,
mm-hmm,
not like from wagging his tail though. He's just like ready to go, and I
mm-hmm.
thought that was he's a very expressive dog. He did keep looking at the camera though, so we're gonna have to give him some notes on that.
Poor dog. Um, but and they both. I think that scene, the last scene between Daryl and Carol in this episode, was actually just, I thought, pretty incredible because so much is expressed and not said, and they both recognize that each other has had kind of a hell day, and they both comment on it,
But
and
saying nothing, and
yeah,
I get it. That's like
their
these two,
thing.
and also this show would never just have them rehashing everything that we just as an audience watched happen. But friends and even people who are recovering from a big fight, they might enjoy being able to recount the crap time they just had
Right.
to each other because it's like a bonding thing.
Right,
And
but
so part of me would have liked to have seen, and I know they weren't doing that because they're not there yet, maybe, but I would have liked to have seen them being like, and then this happened, and oh my
right.
gosh, then I broke down the wall, and oh, I killed 2 soldiers and found all this stuff. I just want to see them talking to each other
Well,
like real,
I
real
wanted
people.
something to happen a little bit more with the knife, I'll admit, and I thought that that's where it was going, but it didn't. And again, this is kind of where they leave the audience wanting more with these two, because eventually they will talk, but they're not going to give it to us yet. And so just the fact that he's back, you can see she's very happy that he's back. And
Yeah.
even the act of him letting her keep the knife is a big deal. And also, honestly, regardless of anything, the fact that he's okay with Dog being with her and he trusts her with the dog is a pretty big deal, too. So, especially now that we know where the dog came from. So, I think, it's as you're not going to go, as I said, these characters are acting exactly like you would expect them to act. And we'll see a little bit more, I think, from them. But I still enjoyed this episode, even though it was a little bit less action packed than the last one. And I still enjoy seeing the interactions between these two, even if it was separate, just how they both cope with different things. And Angela Kang did her after commentary, and it's kind of what she was saying, is that these are both people that just have a really hard time communicating and processing, and they do things in different ways. And this was kind of a way to see what they do without each other to some extent. And I kind of like that idea.
Yeah, as usual, her epilogues are extremely valuable to just break down what they were thinking about. And she even talks about how the rat idea has probably been around in the writer's room for a really long time. And I'm glad, like, that is probably they need to address the fact that these kinds of pests would then become like an existential threat to food supply and to, well, just like your heebie-jeebies. So I'm glad that they have been talking about these sorts of things in the writer's room, and then they like figure out a way to get it into a story, and hey presto, you've got yourself an episode.
Yeah, and I always love how what her commentary adds to different things, and I liked the sort of the representation of the rat. And like you, I kind of liked the idea of even addressing some of these things that are going to plague these kinds of civilizations, or these new little compounds and things like that. Rats definitely go to where there's food sources. And, one thing that struck me, and it's exactly what you said, is what happened to the rat traps? Like, how would you keep this at bay, right? Not just rats, but mice. Anything that's going to try to scavenge, squirrels, all those things, they're kind of in the middle of the woods. And
these are animals that are not going to be easy to catch for zombies, and so they're
right.
probably exploding in terms of population.
That's kind of what I was thinking. And so I honestly thought that there would be more of I thought maybe she would come up with the total solution to the rat problem or something like that. I don't mind where they went with the episode, and I like that. I like that it's kind of been ruminating. But it was just kind of, it was making me think about, oh, well, what would they do? Because these things are just totally destroying or maybe it's an idea of somehow how to keep the grain and everything safe in the face of these sort of like crazy populations of animals. The other thing I thought, though, was that it's exactly what you were saying, that you thought she was going to use it for food. Well, if this is the animal population that's exploding, it seems kind of weird that they wouldn't figure out a way to somehow use it as food, as distasteful as that might be. It's still a food source, right?
Daryl was eating squirrels in
right.
season 1.
Right, I mean, but we don't see a lot of that later. So it was kind of interesting that they're kind of acting like because I agree with you. I don't think that the walkers are going to eat all the squirrels. They're too fast, and plus up in trees a lot, right? So
yeah, well, squirrels might be a little harder to get, but and honestly, these are all hard to get animals. Yeah, so very, very interesting. Maybe they can go back to the hospital that was the scene of the finale and get some of those cats, because that place was just full of cats for no reason.
Yeah. So
but yeah, it would be cool if they could just have a whole ton of cats at Alexandria. I'd be okay with that. So what is the next episode coming up is Here's Negan, and I think then that is the end.
I think that is the end.
And then the following week we see the beginning of the second half of Fear the Walking Dead.
Yeah, so I'm ready to jump into that, and I'm psyched about that, unless you want to do an interlude, and either way is fine with me.
Yeah, I don't know whether there is anything else for us to...
What? You don't want to watch Dead again? No, kidding. Anyway, no, I think that sounds like a good plan. But I'm definitely looking forward to the next episode for obvious reasons, because I love Negan as a character. I think he's really interesting. So can't wait to talk about that with you. But If any of our listeners want to comment on this episode and on the way that the season is going, feel free to shoot us an email at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com, or you can tweet at us, reanimatedpcast, or just leave a note on our website, reanimatedpodcast.com. And until next time, ciao.
Thank you, and bye.